Well, I've been a pastor for actually, in August, it will be for 30 years. And throughout my years in ministry, I have noticed that there are Christians who are very confident about sharing their faith, and there are Christians who are very hesitant to do so. Now, most of the Christians that I have known who share their faith with great confidence come from churches that have a very clear, specific teaching around doctrine. They give very clear direction to their members about what they should believe. And these churches see questions as problems that can be solved by faith. And faith in a church like that is the opposite of doubt. But the churches that I have been a part of, on the other hand, well, those churches encourage their members to ask questions. Right here, for example, we encourage everyone to be honest about your doubts, to not be ashamed of them. We think of questions and doubts as part of everyone's faith journey. Faith is not something that you have or you don't have. It's something that people develop over the course of their lifetime, and asking questions and entertaining doubts and being honest about all of it is a very important part of being on that journey. But here's the thing. At all of those kinds of churches, people seem very hesitant to talk to other people about their faith. Have you noticed this difference? Do you know what I'm talking about? Years ago, somebody told me a joke that kind of sums it all up, and I have never been able to forget this joke. The joke was, what do you get when you cross a liberal Protestant with a Jehovah's Witness? You know that one? What do you get when you cross a liberal Protestant with a Jehovah's Witness? Well, somebody who knocks on your door with nothing to say. And these days, I see that tension, not just within Christianity, I see it everywhere in our culture. There are people who share their views with others in conversations and on talk shows and in political debates, and those people seem so confident. They never admit to doubts of any kind. They dismiss all opposing views. And then, on the other hand, there are people who engage with other viewpoints, who are curious, who want to learn about what somebody else thinks and feels. There are people who wonder out loud about things. And those people very rarely get the microphone. They don't go viral. They don't get a lot of likes. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed who we give the microphone to? See, this is the challenge of Easter. It's maybe reassuring to know that this tension, this problem has existed for at least 2,000 years. The story of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, which is the centerpiece of the whole entire Christian year, asks us to be confident about something that remains a mystery. And that is really, really hard to do. And nothing in this world encourages us or trains us or supports us as we try to do it. But I think that in this world of clickbait and sound bites and bluster, this world needs the challenge of Easter more than ever. But let's take a look this morning at where the problem starts. You'll see it there in the Gospel of Mark. Now, the Bible scholars here in the room probably know that the Gospel of Mark is the oldest of the 4 Gospels, all right? And as you have just heard, in Mark's version of the Easter story, well, there's a pretty unsatisfying ending. In the story, 3 women go to the tomb of Jesus. They encounter a man who is dressed in white at Jesus' tomb, and they hear from him that Jesus has been raised from the dead. You got it? That's it. That's the story. That's the story of Easter in the Gospel of Mark. There is no appearance of the resurrected Christ. No one talks to Jesus. No one touches Jesus. So it really is no wonder that these women didn't say anything to anyone about what they had seen. I mean, who would believe them? What evidence did they have to offer? Oh, well, I saw this guy in white and he told me. Wait, what? No. The story of Jesus' resurrection in the Gospel of Mark is so unsatisfying that even the early Christians couldn't stand it. If you read the end of Mark in most Bibles, including the one in the pew in front of you, you'll discover that there have been additions to this story. Additions that do not appear in the oldest manuscripts of the Gospel of Mark. And the later Gospels, Matthew and Luke and John, all those later Gospels add additional material as well. They tell stories of sightings of the resurrected Christ, conversations with him, and they all offer those as evidence for the evidence that prove what Mark quotes this young man in white as saying. They don't just leave it as take his word for it. Future Gospels give more evidence. But even if you take all four of the Gospels combined, even if you look at the accounts of Easter in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it is really striking how little evidence is actually presented for the resurrection. Jesus really only appears to a few people. And all of them are his devoted followers. And he appears just briefly. Sometimes he appears just for a moment, and then he disappears again. And sometimes when he appears, he warns everybody not to touch him. Now, sometimes when he shows up, he shows evidence of having a physical body. So, for example, there's a story of him eating a fish in front of all of his disciples. But in another scene, Jesus, the resurrected Christ, suddenly appears in a locked room, suggesting he doesn't exactly have a body of the sort that could eat a fish. So what is going on exactly? It's really clear that the people who wrote these accounts of the resurrection did not attempt to explain or to describe or to harmonize the accounts of everything that happened. And yet, as the Gospels progress from Mark to the later Gospels, these instructions that the women hear from the man in white to share this news with the disciples, well, those instructions become a command to tell the whole world about what has happened. And if that's what we're supposed to do, sometimes I wonder, and maybe you do too, couldn't we have just a little bit more to go on? If we're supposed to tell everybody about this, well, why didn't Jesus appear before the people who charged and convicted him? Right? I mean, why didn't Jesus appear to Pontius Pilate? Or to the Roman emperor, for that matter? Why didn't he at least stand on the steps of the temple for a few minutes and let a couple dozen impartial observers see his resurrected body? Then we could be for sure certain about what happened. Then we could feel like we could go and share this news all around the world with real confidence. Every day we hear about actions that are taken by people and groups who are fueled by total certainty. Terrorist movements, conspiracy theorists, political campaigns alike, certainty seems to have this kind of momentum and power. But questions, wonderings, on the other hand, well, those seem to catch us and just sort of hold us in place. I often think these days of the line from William Butler Yeats' poem, The Second Coming, which was written after the First World War. Do you know that poem? He writes, "The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." And isn't that Isn't that the danger? If we acknowledge how little we actually know for sure, well then, will we ever have anything to say to a world that's bombarded by all the stories from all those people who know things for certain? But here's the thing. There is actually one thing that we know absolutely for certain about the resurrection. Somebody told somebody that it happened. Because if they didn't, we wouldn't be sitting here this morning, right? The story would have ended right where we heard it, there in the Gospel of Mark, with nobody saying anything about it. But somehow, the women who first saw the tomb empty, they somehow got over their fear. And they told somebody something. How did they do that? How does anyone ever get over their fear of being wrong, of sounding foolish? Well, there's one option, of course. Maybe they were bluffing. Maybe they just pretended to be more certain than they really are. Maybe they decided to just fake it till they make it. I think a lot of Christians feel pressure to do that. Maybe some of you do. But there's another option, of course. There's another possibility. Maybe these women did not have to pretend to be certain in order to have the courage to speak. Maybe they just had to decide that uncertainty does not disqualify somebody from speaking. They had to get past the fear that having questions that you can't answer make you look stupid. They had to declare that mystery is more than just a problem to be solved. That mystery is part of the promise that we have to share. What if we did the same thing? Easter raises questions that we can't fully answer because those questions are right there in the Bible. They're right there in the original account of Jesus' resurrection. There's a lot of mystery to this story. What if instead of seeing all those unanswered questions in the story as some kind of problem or error, what if we saw them as part of the gift of Easter? What if they were a feature, not a bug? Here's a way to think about that. I wonder if any of you have had to learn how to walk in the dark. Did you ever have to do that? Maybe you're out camping. Maybe you're at summer camp. Maybe your power went out last week and you needed to walk around at night to find the bathroom. You know, when you're walking in full daylight, all you need to navigate your way is your sense of sight, right? You just need to look where you're going and you find your way. But when we walk in the dark, we need to listen more closely, right? We need to put our hands out in front of us. We need to feel more carefully with our feet as we go. We need to be willing to bump into things and to hang on to other people. And it can be really disconcerting to have to walk around in the dark, but you know what? With practice, we can actually become quite comfortable moving forward even when we can't see clearly. And in the process, we learn how to relate to the world around us and the people next to us in a new way. What senses would we need to develop in order to walk confidently into a mystery that we cannot fully explain or describe? What capacities would we begin to utilize if we took those first tentative steps away from certainty into a different kind of knowing? I don't think we'd have to turn off our brains. I think we would have to use them more fully. I think we wouldn't have to silence our doubts, but we would not be able to use them as an excuse to stop moving or to say anything. We would have to let our sense of wonder prod us forward. To notice, to bump into things and into people, to appreciate things that have been hidden to us before. Friends, if we claim certainty about Easter, we do a disservice to the gift that Scripture has given us. This is a story that is tentative, incomplete, a story that leaves questions unanswered. When it comes to Easter, mystery does not end the conversation. Mystery starts it. Questions don't stall Easter out. They challenge us to walk in a different way, guided by a different kind of sight. And that may well be the only way forward for our world. Because when it comes to the truest, most powerful things in life, certainty is always pretend. It's always a kind of bluff. Love, forgiveness, promise, trust, well, none of that can ever be proven by pointing to evidence. But you know what? Without all of those mysterious things, nothing else matters. Friends, you have something to say. You do. Christ is risen. We will not allow death to have the final word. We will not let death be the thing we know for certain. We won't give death that kind of power in our lives or that kind of power in this world. There is something more. There is something else. There is something surprising, something unpredictable. And if we are willing to wonder what that could be, then all sorts of things that have been sealed shut will start to crack a little bit. Don't be afraid of wonder. It's how all the most powerful movements begin. So let us declare this mystery with confidence. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Amen.